Rapture, Part 2. BD number 6681. October 30, 1956. Time and again you will receive clarification through my word concerning spiritual problems which you are unable to work out by yourselves, where my spirit has to intervene if your thinking is to be correct, thus correspond to the truth. Only truth has a beneficial effect. The soul cannot derive any advantage from misguided thinking, instead it will even thicken its surrounding layer because misguided thinking does not originate from me but from my adversary. Yet people are not always capable of accepting the pure truth unveiled. Like children they sometimes have to be taught by way of images and parables which, however, nevertheless entirely correspond to the truth. And wherever this is the case my adversary likewise seeks to intrude and distort these images and parables to prevent people from thinking correctly. And thus, it necessitates enlightenment through the Spirit in order to provide a correct explanation or to enable someone to understand what was offered to people in a veiled form, what seers and prophets predicted on my instructions. Humanity's spiritual state demanded such veiled portrayal, because the unveiled truth would have seemed utterly implausible to those who had not recognized people's spiritual development as their purpose on earth, and therefore my written word, the Book of the Fathers, would also have been completely discarded, since the events at the end, had they been portrayed unveiled, would not have found belief and thus given rise to total rejection of my word. I have always prevented an unveiled description of the final events but always provided explanations if they were needed. But as a result, there are also various opinions represented amongst people and everyone endorses his own according to his spiritual state, yet only an enlightened spirit will think correctly and be able to unveil that veiled truth. The end is near, and only a few people will be able to observe the developments at the end, because they shall inform the coming human generation on the new earth of my power and glory, of the conclusion of the old and the beginning of a new period of salvation. These few, however, will be lifted away by me from earth as soon as the end has come. But when this happens much wailing and lamenting will arise on earth, for this process of rapture will be seen by all people on earth and triggers, because it is beyond natural law, immense terror, for then the people staying behind will know that they will become victims of destruction. These people will not see my coming in the clouds because I cannot be visible to those who adhere to my adversary. Only my own will be able to see me and, full of joy and praise, stretch out their arms towards me. And I will lift them up to me before their fellow human beings' eyes. And just a few will cry out to me in intense distress, not driven by fear but in sudden realization and utter remorse. I know them and address them time and again, they merely need a profound shock in order to surrender their resistance and hand themselves over in their hearts. And these are the people who will arise from their graves in order to also be taken away from the earth, because I know their hearts, they call upon Jesus Christ with profound faith in him and his help, and thus they will find redemption from sin and death. And the graves will still release many dead people who will arise into life. People who will be more impressed by the final events on this earth than they care to admit, where only the lid will have to be pushed aside from the grave, which will be achieved by the tremors at the end. But what will still happen before that can yet contribute towards the awakening of dead souls, for hell will spew out its most evil demons. And elevated beings will descend from the kingdom of light, and the struggle for people's souls will be plain and observable by my own, who will then experience the exposure of what had previously only been announced to them in a veiled form. And the scales will suddenly fall from the eyes of my own, for then they will understand what hitherto had remained concealed to them but what the spiritually awakened person essentially understood. But since people are particularly strongly attached to matter in the end, the knowledge about my plan of salvation for redeeming the souls will also be little known. And this alone is the key to all revelations which were given to people in a veiled form. People are unaware of individual periods of salvation even if they believe in a justification, a last judgment, and in an end of the world. And according to this knowledge they try to interpret the revelations which relate to this end. And the more intellectually they do so, the more confused become their results. My spirit, however, reveals to them in most simple terms the signs as well as the happenings at the end. And the rapture of my own will be the last process taking place on this earth before its destruction, before the complete change of this earth's external shape, which will wipe out all life on it. It is not as if there will still be a long time afterwards in which people can discuss this happening, for this would undeniably signify compulsory faith for those left behind. No human being would then be able to close their mind to the realization of a living God and be forced to believe in him. Yet I don't use such means in order to gain this faith, consequently the end will come as soon as I fetch my own from this earth. The horror of this will coincide with the horror of certain death facing those who are left behind, for the earth will open up and flames burst through. People will feel paralyzed and incapable of thinking apart from the few which only need a small incentive to recognize me and call upon me in utmost need. But they are known to me, and therefore I will have mercy upon them, and their souls will not have to share the agonizing fate of the others. Whatever will come to pass, it was only possible to give people an illustrative prediction, for they would never have understood it as long as my eternal plan of salvation could not be explained to them. And people's low spiritual state did not allow for this. My word, however, has always been preached to people, and my word urged them to be lovingly active. Complying with my word, complying with my commandment of love would have guided you humans into realization and thus also into the knowledge of my plan of salvation. In that case they would have understood the symbolic descriptions, which certainly were understood by those whose life of love had resulted in spiritual enlightenment. Yet the nearer it gets to the end, the more people's thinking will become confused, and the more mysterious are the images which their intellect is now trying to decipher. People should only ever try to keep to what I myself told them while I lived on earth. They should accept my words and live accordingly, and they would be surprised to realize that they are becoming enlightened, that they fully understand everything which so far had been ambiguous to them, for then my spirit can work in them and kindle a bright light for them. However, anyone who believes himself capable of gaining realization through eager studies yet neglects to live according to my will never attain realization. He will lose himself in ever more erroneous thinking, and no matter what he believes himself to have discovered, he will have to discard it again and find no illumination within himself. Only my commandments of love and their fulfillment ensure your correct thinking, and in that case every word, every prediction, and every indication about the end will be understandable to you, for then you will be enlightened by my Spirit, which never errs and always guides you into truth. Amen.